Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Business Technical Fundamentals series. In this module, we will be discussing deploying applications to company-owned Windows 10 devices by leveraging the Intune capabilities of Microsoft 365 Business. There are a number of different ways we can deploy Windows apps using Intune. We can assign or publish apps from the store, making them available via the Intune company portal or directly from a curated private store. Microsoft 365 Business provides a default installation of the 32-bit version of Office 365 Business Premium, but you can also create your own deployments if specific requirements need to be met. A traditional Windows desktop app can also be deployed as an MSI via the line of business option under Other. And finally, there may be other deployment requirements that don't really fit the traditional MDM approach of app deployment, so we could use Intune to deliver PowerShell scripts to the client devices that would then trigger those application installations. In order to deliver Microsoft Store apps, you need to enable Intune as the management option in the store for business. We can then choose which apps we want to add to the private store, and then by synchronizing with Intune, we can populate the apps list with those apps so that we can publish or assign applications as required. When installing an app via the MSI option, it needs to be a single file MSI installer. Many commercial products are available this way, but if the app you require isn't, you could choose to repackage it as a single MSI using one of the many different repackaging tools that are available in the market. These MSIs need to be uploaded to Intune, where they are stored for cloud-based distribution out to client devices. The example that I'm using here is the Azure Information Protection Client, which would normally be a required installation if you want to leverage this functionality that's included with Microsoft 365 Business. When deploying Office from the Microsoft 365 Business portal, you are getting a configuration that is most likely going to work for most users, 32-bit with all of the desktop apps installed. However, there may be some scenarios where you need more granular control, including some cases where the 64-bit version of Office may be the required option. You can also have the ability to When deploying Office from the Microsoft 365 Business portal, you are getting a configuration that is most likely going to work for any users, 32-bit with all of the desktop apps installed. However, there may be some scenarios where you need more granular control, including some cases where the 64-bit version of Office may be required. You also have the ability to select the update channel, but my recommendation is to keep it on monthly or monthly targeted. This means that users will get monthly feature updates to Office, so while there may be many incremental changes over time, they are gradual and possibly less intrusive for users who are resistant to change. If you have other applications that have a requirement for legacy Office add-ins, you may want to be a bit more conservative with the update cycle. Ideally, you would be using Windows Analytics to detect these add-ins and evaluate whether they are still required, or just unused legacy remnants that can be safely uninstalled from the device. There are scenarios where you may need more flexibility to install a desktop app, perhaps from an on-prem file server. You can create a PowerShell script for these deployments and then upload it into Intune and assign it as needed. For Office 365 Business deployments, we will be discussing this option in more detail in the Upgrading to Office 365 Business video. Now that we've spoken about several of the deployment options, we can look at how these can be configured within Microsoft Intune. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, the only application deployment capability that we have here is the option here where we can go through and manage the Office deployment. But in this case, what we really want to do is go through and take a look at what some of the additional capabilities are that we can leverage that are enabled by some of the behind-the-scenes capabilities that Microsoft 365 Business provides. So let's start off with the Microsoft Store for Business. So this is businessstore.microsoft.com, and what we can do here is we can actually go through and start adding Windows Store apps into our own private store. So this means we can then start pushing them into Intune for management and deployment purposes. And the way that we do that is if we jump across to Manage and then we take a look at Settings, you can see here that we've got settings, distribute, and from here what we're saying is that we want to enable the private store, but then for management tools, you'll see here that I've actually enabled Microsoft Intune to be the management tool that will go through and handle the distribution of the Microsoft Store applications. So if we take a look at the apps that I have added into my private collection here, you'll see that I've got a private store or a collection here called Mark O'Shea 365. I've got the company portal, so this is a way we can do some self-service capabilities from the end user side, but we've also got some additional apps that I think we'd say are line of business apps that we need to get deployed. And this way, when we are going through and deploying these, we're just using the infrastructure of Microsoft Store. We don't need to worry about downloading, deploying, packaging them up and distributing them. We just let, when the user either manually installs them or when we choose to push them out, it actually just uses Microsoft's infrastructure. So now that we've integrated that and we've got a few that I've already added in, if we jump over to Intune in the Azure portal and we take a look here under mobile apps, you can see here that we get a bit of a summary. It's telling me I've got a few apps that that haven't installed correctly, so I need to eventually go through and see what they are. But to get an idea of the different apps that I've got, you'll notice here that I've actually got quite a few different apps installed. Quite a few of them are Microsoft Store for Business apps. The majority of these are business focused, but what you'll notice though is I've actually got a couple that you probably wouldn't classify as business related. So Microsoft Minesweeper and Candy Crush. Now, why would you have something non-work related on there? Well, it might be that someone in the organization, perhaps the business owner, is the one who's demanding that they have their application or utility of choice, even if it's not something that's part of the corporate policy. Now, there are other types of apps that you'll see in here, and so things like iOS Store apps could be in here, Android apps could be in here. You'll see the Office deployment piece that corresponds to what we saw in the Microsoft 365 Business Portal is also in here. But the one that I want to focus on for now is this Azure Information Protection piece. So as we go through and take a look at the properties for this, this is the way that I'm going through in my environment here and pushing the Azure Information Protection client out to the appropriate Windows devices. If we take a look at the properties, the options that we've got here are to upload the application package file. So you can see here that the name of the file is AsInfo Protection MSI for Central Deployment. That's actually the name of the file as you download it from Microsoft. So it's fairly clear what the purpose of that file is. Now, when we take a look at the app configuration, what we can start seeing in here is, we can put some naming information. Do we want to put it in a category so that if we do want it available in the store? So in this case, we can put it in the store. We could make it a featured app so that if someone was browsing for things that we want them to install. But the other option though is we could make this a required installation so that if it's something that someone actually needs, so if we are leveraging Azure Information Protection in the organization, we more than likely don't want to give it make it an optional install for the user. We want to make it a required install. And the way that we can see how we've actually gone through and deployed this is we can go through and we can see, through the assignment here, you can actually see that I've made it an available install as opposed to a forced install. But we do have flexibility around how we work with that. Now, if we jump back to Intune and we just dig a little bit deeper, the final thing that I'll show you around Windows Store apps is if we scroll down back to mobile apps, down to Windows Store for Business, or Microsoft Store for Business, sorry. And this is something that I've already enabled because when you first enable it, it does take a little bit of time to run. So I've already enabled this, and what it means is that if I've just been in the Microsoft Store for Business adding some new apps and I'm impatient and I want to start managing them immediately, what I can do is just click Sync. That will trigger a synchronization, and within a few minutes we'll actually be able to go through and see those apps in that listing alongside the others that we've got in here from the store. Now, just to wrap this portion of the demonstration up, if we go back one level with Intune, the thing that I want to show you in here is when we go to device configuration, this is where we get the option to start working with the PowerShell script option. So if we wanted to go through and add additional apps, so we might have a situation where we've got an app that we're going to deploy from an on-prem file server, we could go through and have, as long as we've created that script, we could go through, we could add that script in, and then have Intune go through and deploy it out to the users that we've assigned that out to. So there's not a lot of configuration settings in here that you can see. It's, run the script with the logged in user credentials, and if we do really want to start locking down security and ensuring that the script is actually signed and it's something that our organization recognizes, these are things that we can also do to make sure that there are no rogue PowerShell scripts that are coming into the organization. So that's just a quick look at that one. But it gives you a bit of an idea that you do have a few different ways that you can deploy apps, depending on, really, I guess a big part of it is going to be based on what the application requirements are when it comes to deployment. So let's jump back and we'll finish up the presentation portion. As you've seen, there are multiple options for deploying applications to Windows depending on the type of application and the business requirements that need to be met.